Viewers, a very warm welcome to In Dialogue with Ahsan Zaman. Today we have with us one of the Pakistan's leading actors and also producers and directors, Mr. Adnan Malik. Adnan, what can I say, has done so many things at such a young age. He's been a film actor, a TV actor. He has been a producer, director, and he's also been an MTV VJ. So, and I think a lot of people know this already, but perhaps it's worth mentioning. Adnan has been an associate producer with Coke Studios, which is one of Pakistan's biggest exports globally as far as music is concerned. And he has been directing or producing, I think, the Lux Style Awards for a number of years, I think. And
This is
last
all
but not least,
old information, but sure, keep going.
I think some key moments in Adnan's acting career were his drama serials Sadke Tumhare by Hum TV, and his acting his role in the film Cake, which was critically acclaimed globally, not just in Pakistan. So Adnan, thank you for giving us your precious time and welcome to the show. First of all, how are you?
I'm well, thank you so much. Thank you for that lavish introduction. I mean, a lot of those things are from a different life. But yeah, I mean, I think I look at myself more as a sort of a director, actor, and maybe, what is it? Maybe an activist, maybe now getting into that phase of my life. So
Fascinating.
I'm well. I'm in Karachi. I was trying to figure out the lighting, so I'm sitting on the floor, but this is nice. I feel grounded. And I'm ready to ready to do this, man. And thank you for reaching out also. And I like the work that you're doing. It's nice to also keep that connection going with the UK. And I feel like the world has become so globalized that everyone's kind of connected. Also means I cannot be. I'm like, if you get recognized as a Pakistani celebrity anywhere in the world now. So it's a double-edged sword.
It is indeed. Indeed. So Adnan, I was looking at your profile, and I know Wikipedia is not that credible these days, but I think I could establish that you went to the US, did a degree from there in filmmaking, and I think perhaps history as well. So my question was, when you studied filmmaking, were you planning to be a documentary filmmaker or an actual feature film filmmaker?
Yeah, so basically I went there like all good Pakistani boys. I was there as an econ major. I went to the school called Vassar, which has got a really a wonderful history for the arts. I mean, Jane Fonda went there, Meryl Streep went there, wow. Anne Hathaway was my classmate. You know, I mean, things like that. So it's a very well. Yeah. It's a very. She'd just done the Princess Diaries, I think, at that point. She was just like 19 or 18 at the time. So it was a great sort of art school. I got in when my brother went to Oberlin and my sister went to Wesleyan. So it's a small liberal arts school which kind of fit into the three. And I went in as an econ major, but I was quite unhappy the first 2 years as an econ major. And so I was like looking over my shoulder and looking at other options, and I saw that you could study popular culture and art history, and then I saw film majors, and I was like, oh my God, like I had not even been exposed to any of this growing up in Islamabad. So at that point, I was just very unhappy. I remember sitting in an econ class, and I was like, how am I going to actually pass this class? I don't, and it was a microeconomics class, and I was like, I just don't feel it, and I think there was a lot of anxiety around it. And I just took this art history course. I took a couple of film courses, and boom. And this was I did that, and then it was right around September 11th. So I ended up creating a documentary at that point in Pakistan it was called Deconstructing the Terrorist. And the idea was to also humanize to basically give context to the whole story of how the Taliban were created and the whole Cold War situation. And sort of like also because like making Americans implicit in the whole process, being at an American liberal arts school. And of course, I was at a liberal school, so it was all really well received. And so I did one documentary. Then I was a cinematographer, and that was of course on Pakistan and the terrorism. The second one was on a music band called Gogo Bordello. And then I was like, man, like this is, and we were getting recognition for it. We got into the Student Academy Awards. So then So then at that point, I made a documentary on, and I wanted to do a post 9/11 kind of doc. In America, and it was on this Muslim transgender called Bijli, which also just happened by chance. I was looking for something to do with Islam and kind of opening up that idea. made that film, and again, that did really well, and it won at the Kara Film Festival as well as a finalist at Student Academy Awards, won something in Delhi. So it kind of crossed bridges, and I was like, oh, I love this.
Yeah.
And so I guess the doc, coming back to your question, I think the doc stuff just kind of happened because I wanted to work with identity and representation.
Right.
But the film that really changed me was, or really had a huge influence on what I wanted to do, was Meera Nair's Monsoon Wedding.
Oh wow, loved it. What a film.
Yeah, because that really dealt with so many issues of the subcontinent, of masculinity, of child abuse, of it was like it was a strong feminist piece, but it was kind of appreciated across the world. Had great music, had the Bollywood tropes, but was kind of an indie film. And I remember my friends, who were mostly white Americans at the time, when we watched it in the cinema, they came out, they were like, "Oh my God, your culture is so beautiful." And I was, and then I was like, "Oh, so films can actually, make a huge difference."
They make an impact.
So I think, sorry, I'm talking a lot, but just to get closer to the point, was that I think the documentary medium was always interesting to me, but I think the narrative world where you have to recreate reality was always a challenge. But now I make TV ads for a living, so it's all kind of come full circle. So I think the idea was always to do work that's kind of, in some way,
films.
Sorry?
So the idea was to do something that was linked with sort of films, documentaries, but like which one in particular, when you started your career, where you thought, this is what I want to be, like...
I'm not one, so I'm a Gemini. I've never thought what I wanted to be. I still talk about what I'll do when I grow up. So, I'm one of those people, and my mother's like, aren't you going to settle on something? I was like, this is how I want to live my life. I just want to do different things, whatever I'm passionate about at the time. And so it was never, I want to be a documentary filmmaker, or I want to be a feature filmmaker. It was always that I want to make work that will touch people's hearts and will be able to change perhaps a little bit of their perception on things. So, whether then it was Coke Studio, or it was other documentaries, or whether it's even making music videos and commercials or acting, they all kind of come from the same place, which is, can I do something that'll impact people?
I had a follow-up question, and it kind of takes me back before your, studies, that how did you become a VJ? I mean, what's the process of becoming a VJ back then, when MTV was like the end thing? How did you think of it that I'm going to become a VJ? And what was the process for you as a young child to, go through the whole, opportunity? I mean, how did you explore it?
So basically, I remember when Pakistan got satellite dishes in 1990.
Perhaps not.
No, it's not two. I think it was 92 or 93.
Yeah.
And I remember staying home from school because MTV was coming.
Right.
Before that, I used to get videotapes of music videos and be obsessed with it. And then Top of the Pops, while I was really young, my sister used to get these tapes. So I was always obsessed with music videos and music and American culture. I went to an American school in Islamabad, so it kind of also wasn't Islamabad, which is not Pakistan for so many people, and then an American school, So what I am the quintessential burger, as I've been called over the years, but fine. I mean, it's who I am. And so I was always obsessed with music videos, and then it just American culture had a huge influence on me while growing up. And then, of course, I went to an American college. I was also at the American school. So and MTV was just avant-garde. It was cool, man. When we saw that, like, Guns N' Roses, November Rain, or like Meatloaf, like I Will Do Anything for Love, these like big budget music videos. Yeah, but these are the amazing music videos, So I was just like, man, I love this stuff. So I was just always kind of into it. So then when I came back, I think it was called Indus Music. And, as the story is with most, I had all the traditional tropes in my life. I liked a girl who worked at MTV. Yeah, exactly. And so I just literally just kind of followed her there. We kind of just, I don't know, it just kind of happened. There was a reason for it. And so I was like, okay, I'll join MTV. I was still trying to do documentaries. I did a documentary on Pakistani cinema when I moved back called Bhuli Hui Hoon Dastan.
I saw that. Amazing, by the way.
Oh, thank you. I mean, it's a bit redundant, and it's available on YouTube. I mean, not redundant. It's just a bit old school.
It's pretty old school, but it kind of gives you a perspective of how things were and where they kind of ended up. So you did a great job. I mean, that was instantly my next question. You did that maybe almost a decade ago, or maybe more than that.
Yeah,
It was a very
2005
mature
or
thing to
6.
touch upon. Sorry?
I think 2006 or
Well,
2007 or
probably
something.
like 15 or 14 years ago. So you
Yeah,
must be really young back then. What gave
yeah.
you the idea? I'm going to do a documentary on the history of Pakistani cinema.
Yeah, so obviously, when I remember I told my dad, "Ke, Abu, I want to be, I want to do a film major." At that point, he was kind of like, this is 2003 or something. And he was
Yeah.
just like, or 2002, he was just like, not, he wanted me to be a doctor, but also Saqib, my elder brother, was already in the field. And, film wasn't, he was like, "Acha, media studies karna hai." So in his head, it was media studies.
Okay.
And that's okay, and it was fine for me. But his thing was like, okay, always do something where you can help people, because he himself was a doctor. But uh, so coming back to your question about I
Why
lost
did
myself.
you basically, I mean, at a young
Make
age,
the
how did you
doc.
think of
Yes.
having a documentary on history of Pakistani cinema?
So I was trying to place myself, because at that point there were no young people who had studied film studies and come back to
Oh,
Pakistan, and
acha.
there was no industry also. Remember, at that point, the
There wasn't.
cinemas hadn't reopened. The
Got
cinemas
it.
reopened in Pakistan in a big way. And they were these one-off like Javed Sheikh films, or like these one-off films, but it reopened in a big way when Mughal Azam was recolored and the first Indian film came in, and I think that was 2008 or 2009 or
Yeah.
2007. So prior to that, and in fact, my documentary helped bring in Indian films at the time. But prior to that, there was no kind of like a young person doing film. Like, what's the point? Because you had a few TV channels, but like film studies didn't make sense. And I was like, why? We have such an amazing history of cinema, and yet no one's talking about it. And no
Yeah.
one's really done any work on it except for Mushtaq Gazdar, who had written one book called I forgot what it's called exactly, but it's an anthology on Pakistani cinema. So I was like, man, this is an interesting subject matter. Let me place myself and like create something that hasn't been done. And of course, Saqib was kind of obsessed with Lollywood, and so he was a great resource. So I used to have good conversations with him. So I put him in the doc, and then I was one of the organizers of the Karachi Film Festival.
Okay.
So boom, like literally, I was like, okay, this makes sense. No one's done this before. I made it. Took me like 6 months. It was difficult to do, and at the end, kind of no one cared. Like it kind of got into some festivals. I got to travel. Like I went to a Pakistani film festival in Scotland and the South Asian film festival in New York. It got into some film festivals, but in Pakistan, it was on Geo, and no one really cared about it. And at that point, I was a little heartbroken. And of course, at that point was when someone was like, modeling kar lo, acting kar lo. And that is how it works in Pakistan. It's kind of random. At least it was. It maybe less so now. And that's actually how I got into the MTV VJ side. So actually, both your questions are symbiotic in that they inform each other. So yeah.
Excellent. So Adnan, I mean, it's interesting that one looks at your career. You've been kind of very active from a very young age in all these things. But I think the defining moments, when I look at your career, where you got sudden fame, like mass popular fame, was perhaps through the Hum TV's drama serial Satke Tumhare.
Yeah.
And I read somewhere that you said that it was a bizarre twist of fate that you got the role. So my question was, number one, what was it like working in Satke Tumhare? Number one. Number two, why was it a bizarre twist of fate? And number three, what was it like working with Mahra Khan?
Well, you're going to have to let me talk for a while now.
Yeah, go on.
You've asked very deep questions, but please feel free to guide it. So, before Satke Tumhare, I was doing Coke Studio as a video producer. Basically, Hum TV, I kept meeting them, and because I was doing modeling and I was a VJ, and I'd done some ads I did a Pepsi ad with Rima, which was really very popular back then. So people started recognizing me a little bit. And Hum TV, they used to keep asking me, Momina, do this drama. They wanted me in Mere Paas Paas as Momer Rana's role. And they wanted me, and I just wasn't ready. Also, like acting was nothing I was ever really interested in, to be very honest. It was just like, I'm one of those people, whatever, let things come. And then not anymore, but at that point, it was one of those people, when things came, you just see what to do with them. And of course, my mother started acting in 1965. So when PTV used to have live transmissions, my mother was one of the first actors, and she, I think it was late 60s. She was an early childhood educator. She's actually set up a lot of schools, but
Yeah.
she would always act once a year, and she'd always say, this is my outlet, but she didn't do it professionally per se. So it was always there, and I did some
Yeah.
plays, but I was more of a jock while growing up, but I did some plays and I did some things. So it wasn't something that was from left field, but it wasn't something I was really pursuing.
Okay.
Um, so when Momina kept asking me, I kept saying no, 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 no. And then I was like, man, even this modeling stuff, it made me feel really empty and soulless, to be very honest. To be
Oh,
just judged on your looks, because that's what modeling is. It was, I just felt like for myself, I was like, I'm better than that for myself. I don't want to just do things that are based on how I look. I have so much to say. And of course, I'd studied, I had a really good degree. So I did some of that. And then I was like, no. So then Coke Studio came into my life.
okay.
Which we can talk about later. But
Absolutely.
again, in the same kind of twist of fate, came into my life. I said no more acting. I did Coke Studio for 3-4 years, and then as a video producer. And then I remember saying no acting at the time. And then I remember like one day I was just like, okay, fine. I remember just telling myself, I was like, Adnan, I think you're ready. If you want to act, you should act. This is a
Oh,
conversation I was having in my head, because I was like, I feel confident enough as a director now that I didn't want people to see me just as a model actor.
yeah.
So I literally put it out into the universe. I think 3 weeks later or a month later, I got a phone call, and it was from Hum TV, and they were like, "Listen, we want you to act in this drama series, and now you can't say no," because I'd already said no like 3 times
Oh, wow.
over like 5 years. And they were like, "It's with Mahira, and it's with this amazing director, and it's written by Khalilur Rahman Qamar, and it's the main role, and just come in." And I was like, okay, I was like, okay, fate has
Just a question.
dictated something.
Just a quick question. When they made
Please.
you the offer and they told you it's been written by Khalil Rahman, did you know who Khalil Rahman Qamar was when the play was offered to you?
No, to be honest, I did not. I wasn't
Oh,
really into television culture. Like, again, like I said, my interest was always MTV and music videos and American pop culture. And, so
makes
my
sense.
interest was always kind of more international cinema and all of that. So Pakistani dramas, I didn't know that much about. Khalil Rahman Qamar, I didn't know that much about either. But what everyone was like, the screenplay is beautiful. And I was like, okay. And everyone I trusted. And obviously, Mahira was someone at that point who was just kind of getting to the next stage, So she had done Humsafar, had become a big name in Pakistan, but hadn't become a big name internationally. And she's someone who's an old friend, and she's someone I just always had really good chemistry with. We used to co-host sometimes at MTV. We were friends. And I felt safe because I had to take on this very challenging role. So when I was like, okay, I'll do it. And I met Ehtesham also, who's a wonderful man and a great director and a theater director, because I knew that I was raw, Also, honestly, being a bit of a burger, my first language was English. I just went, my mother was my first teacher at the American school. So my mother set up the nursery at the American school. So, मेरे घर में अब्बू उर्दू बोलते थे, but बाकी हम सब अंग्रेजी बोलते थे. So Urdu was still a bit of a challenge for me, and especially Khalil Rahman Qamar's Urdu. But, I was like, I can't say no. Everything just lined up, and so I got into it. And I think, was your next question, how was the experience, or how was it working with Mahira?
How was the experience like working opposite Mahira Khan?
Oh, phenomenal. So, at that point, it was just, Mahira was a good friend. So it was very, she was protective also, I think, in the right way. She knew that I was a green thumb in terms of acting. I could always act because I'd been in front of the camera, but doing something like this was really challenging. And when I read the whole screenplay, I was like, oh, this is intense. And I think, and also because I'm not a trained actor, I didn't have boundaries, So I kind of was, and I had glorified method acting as if it was like, because you hear about it, but I hadn't really studied it too much. And so I remember, I think I read, and I have it here.
Like Daniel Day-Lewis, he's a method actor.
Yeah, but Stanislavski's, was like, he's the original guy. So I remember reading about it, and I was like, man, just lose yourself in the character, just that's the way you're going to do it, because I didn't have acting. I didn't have acting tricks, like most actors have tricks. You can modulate your voice, or you can do something, or if you're trained, then you know.
The past.
Yeah, that's what, getting to your point about depression and all that. So anyways, I took on this role, and, it was like we were shooting all across Pakistan, even though it seems like it's all in one town. We shot in Hyderabad, Karachi, Lahore, outside Lahore, this place called, anyways, I forgot that name, is a gaon where the Shadi was.
Okay.
Anyways. So yeah, man, and I was just kind of completely disoriented, and also I started believing these words, and I didn't know where the boundaries were, and I was really anxious. Like sometimes I'd do like 20 takes, not being able to get the words out, And Myra was very supportive at that time, and she was an easy muse and someone who's like very easy to kind of just work with. And she was, her and Ete Shambai really guided me through that process. And, luckily, a lot of people really connected with it, and I did a decent job. But to be honest, I still haven't watched it.
Oh, really?
It kind of just took me into a dark place.
You
Yeah,
still
it was
haven't
very
watched
difficult.
it? Achha.
No,
Oh, wow.
I can't do, man. I can't do it because the last 10 episodes, I was just depressed because he was depressed because he lost, he couldn't. And like, dude, every day I get about 3 messages. Ke, इतना अच्छा आपने काम किया, but आखिरी episode में why did you not marry her, and I'm like, man, it wasn't me, I was like, trust me, I was just as like depressed because I kind of just got into that headspace because
So
I committed fully to it.
During the shoot, you're saying the last 10 episodes, you actually went into depression.
Yeah, I went into depression because basically, as an actor, I had to tap into my anger, because if you've watched the drama, anyone who's watched it knows that he's an angry young man. I am not an angry young man. I wasn't an angry young man. I was moody young man, but I wasn't angry. Like I didn't know how to be angry. And then I had to keep digging because I had to show anger, but there wasn't conviction in my anger. So kept digging in my own psychology, kept doing my own work. Like Myra's like, you're the only actor I know who takes notes in Pakistan. Like I literally take notes on, because I get into it.
Oh,
I think Adil, she mentioned as well, but because I'm thorough. Like whatever I do, like as I did that Lollywood documentary or whatever, for me, I have to be thorough, and I have, there's a desire for full immersion and being honest to the work I do. So I kind of get digging deeper, and I kind of got into like being a child and realizing, oh, like there's a child self that's kind of unhappy, and so I kind of regressed to this kind of thing, and it triggered all this kind of childhood stuff, parental stuff, social stuff that I didn't know, because we all kind of end up suppressing so much, So my interest in psychology and mental health has now come from this experience where I was like, oh, so it triggered everything. I got into like this major depression, and I remember I used to like spontaneously just cry. I didn't know why. I lost a bunch of weight. I was just gloomy. There was a dark cloud over my head all the time.
wow.
And it was fine when I was acting, but obviously when it lasted like a year after, it wasn't, I didn't want to act after that. I was just like, I can't.
So like when the play ended, the whole depression lasted for another year.
Well, I think when you're in depression, you can't measure it, right? You don't know that you're in depression. Like it's not a clear thing, especially if you had no value.
Persisted.
Sorry?
But that feeling of yours, it kept sort of lingering on.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was always a sense of dissatisfaction, but I think we all have that. Because this was also 2015, the mental health kind of awareness thing is really like Instagram has really fueled it in a lot of ways. And I think it's really come in the last 2 years or 3 years. But then like, I kind of figured out myself that I had anxiety. No one ever told me, so like these were things that you didn't have the tools for. But I started seeing a therapist because my sister and another friend were like, you should start seeing a therapist. And of course, for me, even at that point, it was taboo. Pakistan, like you only see a therapist if something is wrong with you. Because I advocate for a lot of my friends. But 5-6 years ago, it was a taboo. And what was, even my parents were like, what's wrong? Why do you have to go? And, it wasn't clear. And the difference between a therapist and a psychiatrist. And, there's a lot of things. And I think you go to a therapist to improve the quality of your life. Are you still there?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I lost things. And so at that point, I just had to figure all of this stuff out. And so it was really a wonderful journey. And I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful for what Satke did to me. But obviously, I'm not a cookie cutter actor. Like I realized, like acting for me is very personal, and it's full of like getting over my own demons, and so that's why I've been very choosy ever since.
Makes sense. But Adnan, I read on your one of your Instagram posts, I think it was somewhere in Tribune or Dawn, that you wrote, I never wanted to be an actor. I performed for affirmation and validation. Inside, I was sad, incomplete, and I was also full of shame. I hid many parts of my true self so I could receive love and acceptance from family, friends, and society. What were you trying to get validation for, and what were you ashamed of?
Wow, man. So, yeah, I did put it out there, and so I guess I realized that at least in my own family structure and the way that things were, I was always performing for validation from my parents. So my sister is 9 years older, my brother is 13 years older. I grew up in a household where both my parents were working and were very busy. And so I spent
Right.
a lot of time alone. And my mother was very busy. My father was very busy. They both had full-fledged careers and full-fledged hobbies, but were very loving towards me. But also, I think they were there's this concept of intergenerational trauma or inherited trauma. And I think my parents were also like, that generation, my dad saw partition when he was a young child. My mother also, had to like leave Hyderabad, Deccan in a car, and, they left everything they knew behind. And so, my parents are older, so they're from a different, older generation, and I'm the youngest. So, I think they were carrying a lot of their own issues, and they just weren't a lot. I feel like they weren't very present to my sensitive needs on certain fronts. So they were wonderful parents,
Right.
and I think that is something that is something that is across the board. The more I spoke about it, so for me, it was like if I got good grades, or if I performed well in sports, or if I kind of was nice to people in a certain way, or nice to my mother's friends, or like made my parents proud so they could show me off, I would get rewarded. But if I was weak or vulnerable or sad, or not able to fulfill a challenge, that part of me would be avoided or ignored or not given
Right.
love. And so and I think this happens a lot. A lot of parents do this, and I don't think they do it on purpose, but I think this kind of they give attention where the child is, where they want their child to be, so they kind of manipulate. So I realized at some point, okay, performance is going to get me to a certain place, but obviously I had my own kind of personality and the kind of person I wanted to be, and so it led to anxiety because I would have to always perform to get a certain kind of validation and
Oh, I see.
attention. That led to anxiety. Then I carried that anxiety with me my whole life, and then that was part of like kind of the unveiling of all of it. And then I realized, that 90% of the people I know are like this. They just don't, and everyone is kind of struggling a little bit, and they
True.
don't know why. And
True.
so I was like, it kind of was a real insight to me because,
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are carrying a lot of this trauma or
I agree.
shame or
I
anxiety from their own experiences of childhood that are unresolved.
agree.
So now I
Absolutely.
advocate everyone to go to therapy, or at least, have the practices of things like yoga and exercise and
Yeah.
meditation and prayer. And so, so I'm kind of, it's funny, I'm kind of going in that way. So, you keep asking me about my career, kya pata? I told my dad, I was like, you never know, I might be a doctor at 50. So
That's a good one. But
yeah.
Adnan, on a sort of a lighter note, just so
Ah,
we can perhaps move forward, have you
sure.
seen the TV serial Sopranos?
Man, I actually haven't. I know that therapy is a big part of it. I loved Mad Men, which was
Oh,
the follow-up series that Matthew Weiner did, or Weiner. But Sopranos, I need to get into it. So,
you
in
got
fact, maybe that's what I'll start watching.
the main guy in it, Tony Soprano.
Yeah, of
The
course.
actor, I think, is Gandolfini.
Yeah, he
He
passed away. Yeah,
passed
Vincent
away. So
Gandolfini. Yeah,
he basically on a regular basis visits a
yeah.
female. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah,
So
I know, man. So many people have told me about that show. In fact, I've been wondering what to watch, so maybe I'll just dive into
you
that.
watch it,
Thank you.
you'll fall in love with it.
Yeah,
Absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, yeah. It's one of the greatest shows of all time, apparently.
It is. It is. I just love it. So Adnan,
Cool.
just moving forward a little bit, but I'd like to move back a little bit because I think we kind of
Please.
jumped forward a little bit.
Well, you've done your research, so you're asking all the deep questions. So,
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
know,
But I just
yeah.
had a quick question before I move forward, which was that you mentioned you were at Coke Studio.
Yeah.
I One of my favorite things out of Pakistan has been Coke Studios. Although I think recently, the last couple of years, I'm not a huge fan of it, both visually and um, as far as
Hmm.
the music is concerned. But I think the time you were there, perhaps you were there in which years? From which year to which year?
Season 2 to season 6.
I think those were possibly the best seasons. And what
I
I
think
also
so too.
noticed is the difference in the visuals. So just
Yeah.
want to ask you, visually, were you kind of responsible for the look of the show, or were you behind the scenes doing other things?
So basically, Rohail hired me as a very small team. Season 1, Suhail Javed shot it, and I think Zishan was doing some technical work on it, but they didn't like the look and feel of it. So for season 2, they were looking for a behind the scenes producer and a main producer. And so basically when I first saw Coke Studio, I was like, this is something I want to be a part of. I just knew it instantly. Its soul like reached out to me through the TV screen. One of those things, again, I put out into the universe. I got a phone call like, I think when your heart is clean and you can attract the right kind of energy. So my friends called me. In fact, Sanam and Anisa were working on it. Sanam Saeed at the time was still a VJ, and Anisa and Sanam used to do a show. They called me because they knew I was doing documentary work on the side. So they were like, do you want to do this? And I was like, yeah. So I met Rohel. And Rohel, it was a tough sell, but then I opened up my spiritual side to Rohel, and I think that was really what got him. And he was like, oh, come and be the BTS guy. So when I started shooting the behind the scenes, he was like, you got an amazing eye. So I was like, thank you. And he was like, well, you should be the main producer. So you and Zishan Pervez become the main video producers. And so we did season 2 to season 6 kind of just, it was visually, we created a visual language for it, the whole lighting. And that's what they've used around the world now. So it's something that still continues. But back then we did very interesting stuff. And to be honest, Rohel was obviously at the head of it. Rohel is he's an amazing mentor. He's taught me possibly more than anyone else has singularly as a person. I mean, I've had many mentors, but just working with him, he works so well creatively. He's musically so present. He's spiritually present, organizational genius. So he kind of set the structure and then we kind of played within it. And it was an absolute pleasure. And those 5 years were amazing. It was a very small team. Coke Studio became a big deal afterwards. It became one of Pakistan's big cultural exports. And they copied they replicated the same idea everywhere in the world. But it was something I was really proud of because it was something that we created in Pakistan, and it's still something that holds. And you're right about later seasons, things changed. They got strings on board, they got different video teams. And
just a fun fact that after I think Hum TV and ARY or maybe Geo, the third largest network on Pakistan being watched, the channel is actually Coke Studios. That's a
really? Is that a fact?
Yeah, it's a fact. Wow. So it's a big tribute to how global it is. Adnan, I just want to ask you, I just want to move back. I forgot one question. Recently I was doing some research on you and I read that Khalil Rahman comment on you as well.
Right.
What did you think of it when he behaved that way?
So I stayed quiet, I think I did, I just feel like I'm not into that masculine fire feeds fire, it's toxic. So basically, so Khalil Rahman actually, he wrote something really beautiful. I still think he's a beautiful writer. And I think if anyone wants to figure out there's a piece I've written, I'm going to release it at some point. But basically, if anyone wants to figure out what his trauma is, because he's a man caught in trauma, he's a man who's troubled, right? Especially when it comes to his relationship with women and kind of the women in his life. Watch Sadke Tumhare, because the Sadke Tumhare has, that is the source of his toxic masculinity. He feels like, basically, he loved one woman his whole life, and that was his cousin, whose name was Shano. I mean, it's a true story, right? Okay. So he says. And so he loved Shano, and Shano, he held to an elevated stance. So when he says that I am the true feminist, he believes that Shano was the one woman who had his measures of haya and all the things that he talks about, that she's someone who is morally and ethically elevated from everyone else, because his mother was someone who let him down. Because he wanted to get married to Shano. His mother basically ended up marrying his khala's fiance. He found out that his own father was the guy that he always thought was this terrible toxic man, because he thought that his father in the drama, who was married to his mother, was his real father, but it wasn't. His khala never allowed Khalil to get... Yeah. So if you watch the drama, you realize, okay, so this man can never trust women because he believes that women and men are people who are toxic, full of shame, and can't control their desires. So he also thinks all women are kind of weak in that way, except for Shano. So my whole thing is, that's his thing. I just wish that he was able to resolve it, because he keeps telling the same story over and over again, that women are unfaithful because his mother was unfaithful and his khala was unfaithful. The only person who wasn't unfaithful was his Shanu, who died at the age of 30 or whatever.
Is that a fact?
And it's a fact. That's what Satke Tumhare was. It was his own biography. So fact, I don't know who else can verify it, but when I did it, I knew it was his true story. That's why it was so powerful. That's why it also had such a huge effect on me, because those words I was saying were words that had been said before. It was, his spirit was in it. So he's kind of a hurt person. So, then when he comes out, obviously on national TV, and has these issues with feminism, he kind of he has foot and mouth because he hasn't resolved his own issues, which is like a lot of Pakistani men, and that's why he's very popular. He's kind of like 90% of the people, not just men, but a lot of women who also have internalized misogyny. Like, we live in a misogynistic patriarchal society, and that's what's absorbed. By the way, I was in Childreals also. I don't know if you saw it, which is really about all of this.
Afterwards, yeah. We'll
so anyways, yeah, just to finish. When he said, so basically what happened was I went to Aurat March, and obviously he was at that point getting a lot of airtime. So I went to Aurat March. He said some comments on, there were some things that he was saying, and I think on Twitter wrote a kind of didn't respond directly to him, but something about Clealer. I wrote something which was tongue in cheek kind of.
Okay.
Along those lines. Obviously it got to him. He then decided at something that mujhe bada dukh hai, the guy who I allowed to play me. By the way, he had nothing to do with playing me, which is a funny thing. Like everyone kept, like Hum TV and Momina kept him far away from the set because he's very meddling. He's a beautiful writer, but he's not a good director, right? So I never met him. I hadn't even met him once until the whole drama was over. So a lot of factually incorrect stuff.
Yeah.
For me, it's like I'm not engaging in that. I hope to be a better person, and I think I just hope that he gets the help that he needs, and he's so talented that I just hope that he gets the help that he needs so he can tell stories that can actually really help society. But he needs to heal himself first before he can heal others. So.
Makes sense. Adnan, just a follow-up question, very briefly. Have you seen the play Mere Paas Tum Ho, written by him again?
No, I mean, I again, like I said, I didn't watch it, but I know that there was a lot of like patriarchal, and a lot of his own life filtered into it because it's that do take ki aurat, do take ki aurat, and all that stuff, right? About a woman who's not faithful.
I know, but here's my question to you.
Apparently, it was like massive hit.
I think it has been now proven that it has been the biggest, the largest, the most successful TV serial ever on the Pakistani television and also on YouTube from Pakistan. So my question is, what do you have to say about people or Pakistan's culture when on one hand you have these sort of misogynistic plays that become so amazingly successful, and on the other hand you have films like Cake, which hardly do anything at the box office? Why do we have such a huge spectrum of opinion?
I mean, you're asking a really deep, heavy question. I'd love to know Hamza's opinion on this, actually. But no, genuinely, how far do you want to go back? I mean, we can get into the socio-cultural history of Pakistan, but I mean, I think the answer is pretty clear. I mean, we are a patriarchal society.
Sort of open views about feminism and patriarchy, and I really appreciate that. But my follow-up question is that since we're having a discussion about women's rights and so on, and patriarchy as well, there is a counter view from the people in Pakistan when I read the newspapers that the people who represent the Aurat March are typically the people who belong to a different class. And they normally tend to party at night, get together, socialize. They're the liberals, and then they only come out for the Aurat March, but in reality, they live in their own bubble, and they have nothing to do with the mainstream mass culture of Pakistan. What do you have to say to that?
I mean, I think that is definitely a lot of hogwash. I mean, sure, there are people from all walks of life, and there are people, there are people in every field from all walks of life. I think if you look at the problem is everyone gets triggered by the posters at Aurat March. If you actually look at their agenda, if you look at their 10 points, I mean, it's about women feeling safe at the workspace. It's about women having access to transport so that they can go to work. It's about women not being sexually harassed. It's about that's what they want. There's like an agenda that comes out every year, that these are what women want. And that's what it's all about. And most of the women that do come there are like middle class. There are a lot of upper middle class women, but there's also middle class, and there's even lower middle class women who are, I mean, to be liberal doesn't mean to be rich, unfortunately, that is the connotation. And some of it is fueled by the liberals. Sure, they've also done their job in creating that image, but a lot of it is also fueled by conservative people who want to make it seem like ye to ameer log hain, ye to sharab peete hain, ye to party karte hain, ye to aise kapde pehnte hain, ye to bahar se padh ke aaye hain. I mean, that's obviously, again, that's that's something that's fed in. I mean, man, I can't tell you, I've been to 2 Aurat marches. It's amazing. Ek to
Acha.
women are better organizers,
Oh, wow.
hands down. So when women come together to organize something, it's amazing. The energy is so nice. You have women who are running the show, and it's so nice. When you have men running the show, there's dhakkas, people are pushing each other, the men are leering at other women. But when you have the sanctity, it's like some of the mistake is also by the kind of liberal elites who are a part of it, who then kind of need to realize that by putting out really provocative posters and messaging, you
Yeah.
might be hurting the cause.
I mean,
So I think,
yeah, I'm sorry to cut you. I personally, when I saw recently, there was a protest in Karachi, and all the mainstream celebrities were there. But then there was a couple of celebrities. They put a video on Instagram where they're driving towards the march, and they're kind of trivializing the recent rape incident that took place in Pakistan, and that kind of took the media by storm as well. And so my only concern is that sometimes, like you mentioned, some people within the so-called liberal circles, they tend to what's the word? They tend to trivialize the whole notion behind it, which is a bit disappointing to be honest.
sure, man. I mean, I think the burden of responsibility doesn't fall on a few people. That's the problem with Pakistan. They're like, oh, cake movie jo hai, wo aisi kyun nahi banai? I'm like, man,
Yeah,
it's one film. Like, make another film. Like, the problem is that it's like, oh, ye liberals ne ye keh diya, do. So, of course, I mean, someone who, like, padhe likhe jahil is a thing in Pakistan, no doubt. Like, so, I mean, I think it's too much to, like, put the onus of something,
yeah.
on a few people. I'm sure that happened. And I'm sure there's a lot of people who do misrepresent. I mean, we aren't, unfortunately, a very woke nation. And so people will make mistakes. I mean, the perfect example of this, and that's kind of cancel culture. So mainstream culture here has become cancel culture. Culture के वो एक poster था और एक liberal ने ये किया और एक औरत ऐसी थी तो वो तो रात को party करती है तो the whole thing falls, it collapses. It's the same thing in the West about cancel culture. And Jamila Jamil, who's in the UK of Pakistani origin, I mean, she was like, if someone had canceled me back in 2010 because I had said something stupid, and she says I said a lot of stupid things, I wouldn't have been able to become the person I am now and have this influence because I would have been cancelled. So, if you're trying to really build an open-minded culture, then you can. The problem is no one here is trying to do that. Everyone here is just trying to make money, and that's bottom line, and to keep the status quo, which is to keep the patriarchal views in control. And that's why things aren't really going to change. I mean, not to the degree that we would like.
Fair enough. Makes sense. Makes sense. Adnan, we'll move on and go to something slightly lighter. I wanted to go back to your two of your really defining sort of projects in your career. Let's begin with Cake, first of all. Just tell us briefly, what was it like working with Ahsan Abbasi? Because he's become this new, Pakistani director who's really successful and really popular nowadays, and his work is being really appreciated globally. So what was it like working with him? And what was it like working in Cake, first of all? Because Cake, to me, is Pakistan's one of the finest films I've ever seen. And each one of you, all the actors, have performed so tremendously well. It almost looks like no one is acting. It was so real. So tell us briefly about what was the experience for you working in Cake with Asim, and for you working in a film which was almost like a different film to everything else in Pakistan.
So first of all, Asim is he really is phenomenal. I'm lucky to have these amazing people come into my life. Asim is very meticulous. I think Asim's greatest strength is his own writing. So he writes, and I think he writes from a real place of depth and experience and honesty. He doesn't self-censor. I think part of that is also then, I think when you're educated abroad, but then you also live there, but you're also connected to being here. It was an absolute pleasure. He's a real actor's director. He really is very patient with actors. He doesn't tell you how to act. He'll never like tell you what to do. He's just like, he'll ask you questions, So I think, yeah. So, I mean, so he's kind of, in that way, he's phenomenal. And when I first got Cake, when it first kind of came together that I was doing it, I was just blown away by the writing again. Like every time I've done anything good as an actor, it's been because the writing is good, So I've trusted that, even though it wasn't the main role, and I was kind of curious about where it would go, but I was really, really happy in that process. And it was kind of a quiet period in my life because I'd just done Dil Banjara, which was this kind of failed idea. And it wasn't a well-helmed project, And being a director myself, I was just like, oh, It's painful working with people you can't collaborate with, don't see you, who are not concerned with your emotional state. I think acting is ultimately about like, what is the emotional state you're bringing to something. Even directing, it's a creative process. So the team was amazing. Mo Azmi works with him a lot. He's the DOP, and those guys are, they've really done an amazing job of creating something that didn't exist. And Asim, just with his good writing and with his belief and like finding the right people with the right values, and then they made Childreals after that, which is also really progressive. And Asim, someone who's really leveraging his UK kind of, he's from the UK, but also very connected to Pakistan, and has found a niche for himself where he can experiment and explore and kind of really go deep in places that most Pakistanis maybe not comfortable with. But that's fine. We need that voice. We need it so bad, even if it's not mainstream enough, it's fine. Right?
Makes sense. And then working in Childreals, again, Asim is the guy behind it. It has, broken all stereotypes as far as, TV characters are concerned. It's almost 100% of, feminist serial. It's pretty much almost against patriarchy. What was your experience like working in it, in terms of how did you feel about the script when you were in the series? What was your thought process like? Like, okay, this is something different, and I'm just keen to understand. It's something totally different to what Pakistan has seen before. So, what are your thoughts on Childreals generally?
Man, so I have similar views on Cake also. When I did Cake and I played this Christian guy who's a Christian nurse who falls in love with the people who hire him, their daughter. It was already kind of pushing certain buttons, but those are the buttons that I like to push too. So I mean, this is a grouping that I'm a part of. This is my worldview. So working in Cake I was like finally in Pakistan, and obviously making films and doing this stuff is something that I also want to do. So for me, this was kind of practice. And I guess right now, basically I make a living by making TV commercials these days, and I'm enjoying that process. And I know it's a process, it's a time bound process, and I'll ultimately go into the next thing. So when I knew that Asim was doing Childreals, and Mo, who's the DOP and the producer, is one of my best friends, Mo Hassan Azmi. He's very close collaborator with Asim. He was like, "We're doing Childreals." I was like, "Listen, guys, I don't care. I want to be a part of it." I just said, "I don't care. Like, I'll do anything." I was like, "I just want to be a part of this creative process." So, because I just love their creative process, and I trust Asim ethically and morally, So we're on the same page, and I know that he's a brilliant writer. So it wasn't like, they didn't find me a role until the very end. They were like, "Okay, well, there's this role." I was like, "Fine, I'll do it." They were like, "How much do you want?" I was like, "Whatever." Like, I just didn't care. I was like, "I just want to be a part of it." And that's why I did it. And because I was like, for me, there's television, Pakistani content before Childreals and Pakistani content after Childreals. And I think historically, that's how it'll be looked at. And, it's right up my alley, clearly, as we've been talking. I mean, I am all for, I'm ultimately, I believe, I believe in matriarchy. I think, my mother was a very strong figure in my life. My sister is a very strong figure in my life. My maid who raised me was a very strong figure in my life. All strong women, all women who've worked, all women who've taken control of their lives. So, I am the product of that, and a very caring and sensitive father, and like, a wonderful, sensitive brother. So, in my own family, there are no patriarchal norms or ways of being. So, I want to, and I am the product of that. And, I'm a pretty okay guy. So why can't we have more of these stories? Like, you don't have to be like, being the product of being a sensitive male, or being someone who's in touch with their feminine side, or someone who's not like an alpha male, but you could still be like a heartthrob. Like, we can be all those things. I think if you, in the UK now, like gender is something that's sort of moved on. I think so much has moved on in the world in certain ways. And I think, if in Pakistan we're able to create content that can show that, and as people, we can be those people. So I will always want to be a part of something like that. So it's your question about Childreals is like, man, I would do it over and over again. I'll be part of anything that I believe in. So
makes sense. So Adnan, towards the very end, here we are, and you've kind of achieved pretty much everyone your age would perhaps dream to achieve. So the question is, simple question.
I don't know about that, man. That's very sweet, but yeah. Oscars, have like a multi-million dollar app that I've created. Like
Oh,
there's so
right,
much.
right, right.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
but those are the material things, or perhaps superficial.
Sure.
I'm talking about generally the purpose in life. What's your purpose in life now?
Man, thank you for asking that. I think it's something that I'm always thinking about, but I've always wanted to be of help to people, to always be of service. And every day I wake up and my purpose is connected to how can I be of service? How can I change the world around me? And initially it was very ambitious, that's why the big things. Okay, initially I was like, okay, if I become very famous, I want to use the fame to help, then it was like, I want to make big films, or I want to do big things. Now it's just daily. It's like everyone I interact with, can I be kind to them? Can I make them smile? And I realized it took one person to, it's always taken one person singularly to change the condition of my heart, whether it's Mira Nair, or whether it's Rohel, or whether it's Asim, or whether it's Mo, or whether it's, someone I've been in a relationship with, or it's like you're having a bad day and someone on the street is genuinely nice to you. I think, my spiritual beliefs come into this, where I think life is short. I think legacy is something we're sold because capitalism drives it. I think we're all going to die, and no one's really going to remember us a few years after. And I think this time here is a gift. And I think every day we just really need to be present, grateful, and kind of really whoever's around us and ourselves, just be nice and kind, and create work that can maybe help, or whatever it is that you can do, whether it's charity or whether it's the work that you're doing. And you can be a banker, or you can be a lawyer, you can be someone who cleans the gutters for a living, but I think you have the ability to honor yourself and be nice to people. So I really believe that, and I think we have to live day to day, and I think whatever we do, just have that intention. So sorry, now that you've asked, one of the things I say is success for me is not me becoming famous, or me making a lot of money, or me having a lot of influence,
Right.
and people around me not benefiting from it. Success for me is, however successful I become, are the people around me benefiting from it? So it's not a zero-sum game, So I always look at any decision through that lens. I'm like, is this just benefiting me, or is it benefiting other people around me? Or like, if this benefits me and it's going to not benefit my maid, or this will not benefit then I have to take that decision, but be very mindful about it. So that these are simple small things, but I think this is what defines life, makes me happy.
No, of course, of course. I think what you're saying is, if I can sum it up, that moving
Please.
forward in life, you want to make a social impact on a daily basis.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I think we all have to learn to be happy with ourselves. I think that's the other thing. I think social impact, of course, but also like life is short. And I just think these structures that we've created as humanity and as homos. Have you read *Sapiens*?
Yeah, yeah. I know.
So
I have been recommended, actually.
Okay, you must read it. It's one of those things
Well,
that just
because everyone says it.
just opens your mind, and you're like, okay, well, what is this? We sit in like air conditioned rooms, and we go into offices, and at 25 we're supposed to be married, and at 30 we're supposed to have this job, and at 40, like, please, like, I don't think life is a gift. I just feel like there's so many souls and spirits that struggle to not make it, and I'm lucky that there's a body and a spirit that's come together, and this is my life. And like, how can I just be of benefit, and how can I really enjoy it? And enjoying it doesn't mean being numb and being silly and partying. It means just being present and like living it really fully. So I don't know what I'll be doing in 10 years, but hopefully something meaningful where I'm happy. And I want other people to live that way. People are too attached. When you become too famous, by the way, you become too attached to your fame, and it limits you. So when you have too much money, you become too attached to your money, and it limits you. So I think to tread in this world lightly is the goal. So thank you for bringing that out in me. I don't often talk like this on public forums, but
it's a pleasure. So just a follow-up question then: how do you plan to do that? By traveling? What's the game plan?
Game plan is fine. Mashallah, I'm fine. I have a good business. I make decent money. I'm able to attract positivity in my life, and things keep coming. And I think, I really believe that. I think as long as you're positive, and as long as you're grateful, and as long as you're a positive person who puts out good energy, things will come. And something I realized, because going through this difficult period in my own life, I was like, be careful what you ask for, because I kind of got what I asked for at 20. And what I asked for was maybe, to be recognized and to have some fame. And, I didn't ask for the literal things, I want to be an actor or whatever, but I always knew I wanted to be famous and recognized and have influence. And when I got it, it came with a cost, and then I was like, oh, I was like, the universe does give what you ask for. You just need to be careful what you ask for.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So now I don't ask for very tangible things. I ask for feelings and emotions, and I ask for physical health, and I ask for well-being, and I ask for good energy, and I ask for like the universe to constantly just help me make the right decisions and do the right thing. So yeah, the game plan is to keep doing what I'm doing until the next thing comes along.
Fascinating. Well, I would recommend. There's a book called The Alchemist. You should read it.
Of course, I've read The Alchemist.
You are.
Yeah. And I did read that quite in a formative year, so it did have an influence on me.
Yeah. Well, on a very lighter note, Adnan, towards the very end, and just a fun question, really. I'm sure you've seen the film Bhaji. Have you?
Yes, of course. It's my brother.
Exactly.
Sakib's my brother.
So, which of the two films, Bhaji and Cake, do you think, number one?
Why are you putting me in this position?
And which one was more pleasurable to watch for you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you're being.
I've got you there, haven't I?
No, you're being cheeky because it's my brother. But listen, I think for me, the kinds of films that I like personally are more along the lines of Cake, and that's the difference between Sakib and me, and I'm glad there's a difference. Sakib's a master at his craft, and I really. He's obsessed with Lollywood. He's always obsessed, and he's obsessed with like pulp. He's obsessed with like camp and kitsch. And I think and what I love is that Sakib has just kind of, made a first film, and a first film is a very difficult thing to do. And I think he's done an amazing job because it's so playful, and a lot of people don't get the tongue in cheek in it. If you actually look at his music videos historically, you see where he's coming. Like he did.
Oh, I love Kamaj. It's a masterpiece.
Yeah, but he did Behti Nar, which was really interesting. Then he did Nare Na. And he himself is coming on a journey. And so Bhaji, and again, it's a kind of a feminist piece for the most of it. I mean, it's about two strong women. And it's playful and it's fun, and it's a throwback to like Pakistani cinema in the 70s.
Bhaji or Cake?
He's so amazing because he'll be sticking with this. If he sticks with this kind of thing, he'll become like the Almodovar, or like the what's his name? Tarantino, because it's so uniquely Sakib, and his heart is just coming out right now. So that's Sakib for me. Cake for me was more like my kind of film. It's a drier film. It's an artier film. It's a
if you were to make a film,
I'll definitely be more on the Cake side. Yeah, I mean, I'm already working on some ideas. They're definitely more coming of age stories, smaller films. Yeah, I like commercial cinema. I like what Amir Khan has done with commercial cinema. But for me, films will be like, it'll be my healing. And in my healing, if other people find their healing, great. That's what Asim does. He makes things for his own healing. And if other people find it, he's not doing it for big business. I don't think I want to make a film for big business. I mean, I could, but I don't want to.
Fascinating. Well, Adnan, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure talking to you and having your thoughts on so many things on a personal and deeper level. So we really appreciate that, and we wish you all the very best for future.
Cheers, man. I just want to say thank you for reaching out, and I think you're doing a really good job. And it's really nice that you have this kind of outside-in view on Pakistan. It also allows us to be free. People don't often ask a lot of these questions. I saw some of the promos for some of your other interviews. They seem fascinating. I wish you all the best on this. I think you're doing a really good job, and it's good to have people like you commenting and looking into the industry as well, from the UK. So thank you.
Thank you for your kind words, Adnan. So viewers, that is it for this edition of In Dialogue, and we look forward to seeing you all next week, same time.